Hello students, this is part 8 of our poem Paradise Lost book 1 and in the previous video lecture we had covered Satan's fourth speech in which he was addressing his army, his legion which is still lying there in the river of fire, and after hearing his call, after hearing the call of their leader, what is the response of his army? This is what we are going to cover, and let us see. As you can see in front of you, these lines are mentioned here, and the poet says, Milton says, they heard. Now, it is very clear that Milton here is talking about who is they? They is the army of Satan. And Milton says they heard, and they heard what? They heard the voice of their leader, which means they heard the voice of Satan and were abashed. Abashed means they were ashamed. Ashamed because Satan was asking them to get up and to not lie down the way they were lying down. And Satan actually was provocative. He mocked them. Satan उनका मजाक भी उड़ा रहा था बीच में. वो उनको प्रोवोक करते हुए कह रहा था कि उठो, अब क्या तुम यहाँ पर ही लेटे रहोगे? क्या तुम दोबारा अपनी फोर्स को फिर से एक बार, अपनी स्ट्रेंथ को फिर से एक बार रीजनरेट नहीं करोगे? सो दैट स्टेटमेंट मेड देम ashamed, they were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing. And if you remember, when Satan had sprung up from the river of fire, he also opened his wings and took flight. He and along with him Beelzebub took flight. उन्होंने अपने पंख खोले और उड़े. In the same way, now the army of Satan also begins to fly. As when men wont to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves. And here he is using a simile. The poet is using a simile. He is comparing the army of Satan to a watchman who is ashamed and gets up quickly when he is found sleeping on duty. So just imagine a watchman is sleeping on duty and his officer comes and finds him sleeping and calls out to him. तो वो कैसे एकदम से उठ के खड़ा होता है? He is ashamed of himself and immediately rouses himself. अभी उसकी नींद भी चाहे ना टूटी हो, पर शर्म के मारे वो एकदम से झटके से खड़ा होता है. This is how he compares. This is the comparison that the poet makes with Satan's army. All the men, they spring up quickly, they get up quickly, as when men want to watch on duty. Here, want to watch on duty, they are, he is talking of the watchmen. Sleeping found by whom they dread, जिससे वो डरते हैं, यानी कि अपने ऑफिसर से, वो उन्हें स्लीपिंग यानी कि सोते हुए पाता है. राउज एंड बिस्टर देमसेल्व्स. राउज मींस दे बिकम अवेक, आंखें खोल लेते हैं, उठ जाते हैं, और अपने आप को, बिस्टर मींस दे शेक देमसेल्व्स, अपनी नींद तोड़ते हैं. एयर वेल अवेक. एयर मींस बिफोर. Even before they are well awake, अभी पूरी तरह नींद नहीं टूटी होती, तब भी झटके से वो खड़े हो जाते हैं. Similarly, the army of Satan roused themselves, nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were. ऐसा नहीं है, मिल्टन कहता है, it is not that they did not perceive, means they did not judge the evil plight, the sad situation in which they were. They knew that they are in a very painful situation, or the fierce pains not feel. It is not that they were not feeling, they were really feeling the pain. but they were not showing it, feeling the physical pain, क्योंकि physical pain तो है ही. Yet to their general's voice, who is their general? Of course, he's talking of Satan. They soon obeyed innumerable. And he says, despite the pain, despite their situation, they rose themselves and made themselves awake on hearing the voice of their जनरल. तो सेटन की आवाज का ये असर उसकी आर्मी पे होता है, वो एकदम से खड़े होते हैं. एंड प्लीज नोट दैट द पोएट इज टॉकिंग ऑफ देयर इनन्यूमरेबल नंबर. कहने का मतलब है कि उनका जो नंबर है वो बहुत ही ज्यादा बहुत ज्यादा है. अगर आपको याद हो, इससे पहले भी द पोएट हैड यूज्ड एपिक सिमिलीज इन विच ही हैड टॉक्ड अबाउट द आर्मी ऑफ सेटन लाइंग ऑन द रिवर ऑफ फायर लाइक ऑटम लीव्स, है ना. ऐसे कई कंपैरिजन उसने पीछे किए थे कि वो ऐसे उस रिवर ऑफ फायर पे लेटे हुए हैं जैसे पतझड़ में पत्ते किसी नदी पे गिरे होते हैं अनगिनत. सिमिलरली he is making the comparison now, but now they are not lying in the river of fire, they are all trying to take flight. वो उड़ रहे हैं हवा में. तो वो फिर से कंपैरिजन करता है. We are going to find more epic similes now. And he says, as when, and the epic simile begins from here. Epic simile, and I will just tell you the line numbers also. So from line number 339 to line number 343, these are the line numbers in which you will find the epic similes that is here. And I'm going to explain it now. So he says, as when, as is always used for a simile. जैसा कि as when the potent rod of Amoram's son in Egypt's evil day. Now again the comparison is being made and the poet refers to an episode from the Bible. So he is referring to an episode from the Bible, and he is talking of Moses. Now, if you will just go back and revise from the previous lectures, I had told you about Moses. Moses was a messenger of God, and God had sent him to save the people of God, the choicest people of God. And who are these choicest people? They are the Israelites. They are the Israelites, and the poet is referring to this episode when Moses uses his rod. Moses uses his rod to bring plague upon the people of Egypt. Who are the people of Egypt? They are those people who used to torture the men of God, the people of God, the Israelites. So Egyptians हो गए enemies, and Moses tries to save the Israelites from the Egyptians, and he brings plague. Plague क्या होता है? प्लेग एक बीमारी होती है जो कि मोसेस उनके ऊपर लेकर आता है क्योंकि वो भगवान के लोगों पे अत्याचार करते हैं. एंड ही यूजेस हिज रॉड. मोसेस के पास एक स्टाफ जैसा है, जैसे डंडा होता है, वो यूज करता है इस प्लेग को लाने के लिए. ये इस एपिसोड का रेफरेंस हमें यहाँ पर मिलता है. एंड आई विल शो यू हाउ ही मेक्स द कंपैरिजन. वो इस कंपैरिजन को पोएट किस तरह से यूज कर रहा है ये आपने समझना है. And please also remember that when he talks of Moses, Moses basically brings 7 plagues. He brings 7 plagues onto the land of Egypt. And one of them is the plague of locusts. लोकस्ट अगर आपको पता हो तो टिड्डियां होती हैं, और टिड्डियां जब अटैक करती हैं तो वो बहुत ही बड़ी संख्या में आती हैं। दे कम इन ह्यूज नंबर्स। वो कोई एक या दो नहीं होती, दे अटैक इन थाउजेंड्स एंड लैक्स, देयर क्वांटिटी इज रियली हाई, देयर नंबर इज रियली हाई। सो here you must remember that one of the plagues was the plague of locusts. ठीक है, ये चीज याद रखनी है. दिस यू नीड टू रिमेंबर, ओनली देन यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस epic simile which he is using. So it starts from here and moves till here, and he says, as when the potent rod of Amram's son. Who is Amram's son? Amram's son is Moses. In Egypt's evil day, waved around the coast. So he says he used his rod and waved it up, called a pitchy cloud of locusts. And he called a cloud of locusts. इसको cloud क्यों कहा जा रहा है? Because their number is high. ऐसे लगता है कि जैसे टिड्डियों का एक बादल जैसा उस शहर पे छा गया. Warping on the eastern wind, that on the realm of impious Pharaoh. Who is the Pharaoh? Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. Hung like night, and when the locusts came, it was like a cloud on the city. It was like a cloud, and they turned day into night. वो इतने सारे थे कि दिन जो था वो रात में बदल गया, and darkened the land of Nile. Now what is the land of Nile? Everybody knows that Egypt is called the land of Nile. So numberless were these bad angels seen hovering on wind under the cope of hell. Cope of hell means roof of hell. तो वो कंपेयर कर रहा है कि जिस तरह से वो लोकस्ट आए थे, कुछ उसी तरह से ये नंबरलेस बैड एंजल्स का मतलब है these devils, Satan's army, these devils. They were seen hovering means flying on wind under the cope of hell. Between, twixt का मतलब है between upper, nether and surrounding fires. ऊपर, नीचे और आसपास. Nether means down, upper of course you know, and this is how they were flying up, down and in between and around, and everywhere they were seen. Then next he says till, and then he says till, और ये तब तक उड़ रहे हैं, they are flying till as a signal given the uplifted spear of their great sultan. Now he is talking of the uplifted spear, and if you remember, Satan was described as having a shield and a spear. So whose spear are we talking about? This is the spear of their great sultan, which means we are talking of Satan. तो Satan जो है, he is directing them. Satan is directing the whole flight of devils, and then he gives a signal by using his spear, and then they land. ऐसे लगता है कि जैसे Satan के signal से वो land करते हैं upon the plain. Which plain is this? Of course, this is the same plain on which Satan himself is standing along with Beelzebub. So from that river of fire, he directs. So I am reading, he says, still as a signal given the uplifted spear of their great sultan, waving to direct their course. Direct their course means he is waving his spear to tell them where to fly and where to land in even balance. In even balance means in symmetry. It is not as if they are flying haphazard or they are landing here and there. They are flying in symmetry, and they are also landing with great symmetry. Down they light. Down they light means they लैंड ऑन द प्लेन. तो वो बहुत ही ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे में उड़ रहे हैं, और ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे में ही वो उस जमीन पे उतरे हैं. ऐसा नहीं है कि वो कहीं भी उड़ रहे हैं, क्योंकि हु इज डायरेक्टिंग देम? इट इज सेटन हु इज डायरेक्टिंग देम. ऑन द फर्म ब्रिमस्टोन, दिस इज द प्लेन, and fill all the plain, and their number is so huge that they fill the plane. Fill the plane means they are just everywhere. A multitude. Multitude means they are a huge crowd. Like which? Now here, like, he is using like because he is again going to use an epic simile. This is another simile which is describing, which is used to describe the angels, the army of Satan. And from line number 351 to line number 355, he is using this simile. You can see from here these lines are used for this epic simile, second simile that Milton is using. He says, a multitude like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins to pass Rhine or Danube. Now Rhine and Danube, they are both rivers in Africa. I'm just going to explain this uh, and I will also tell you first of all that he's talking of Africa, Libya and these places. And what is the small story that this comparison leads us to? So here he's talking of the savage invaders. I am just using this space to write down. Milton is referring to the savage. I hope you understand what is the meaning of savage. Savage जैसे आदिवासी होते हैं, savage invaders who destroyed the Roman Empire. So these are the invaders that destroyed empires, and please remember he is talking of the savage invaders and they came in huge numbers. तो वो एक अनसिविलाइज्ड आदिवासी जैसे वॉरियर्स होते हैं जिनकी संख्या बहुत ज्यादा होती है और वो किसी भी एम्पायर पे हमला करके उसे खत्म कर देते हैं. And he says they came from the populous north. So north is actually a cold place. North is a freezing place. Okay, and he says they came from the freezing north and then they passed these rivers और इन नदियों को पार करके when her barbarous sons came like a deluge. Deluge means a flood. So they came like a flood. वो इतने ज्यादा होते हैं. They came as if they were a flood of river, a flood of water on the south, and from the north they came to the south and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. And these are again, Libyan sands are the north of Africa. Till here they spread. So just like you don't have to remember all the details. Please just remember this. ये याद रखिएगा. ये details इतनी important नहीं है जितना ये कि कहाँ पर किस तरह से पोएट जो है सिमिलीज का इस्तेमाल करके एक इमेज बनाने की कोशिश कर रहा है. ही इज ट्राइंग टू मेक एन इमेज फॉर अस so that we can actually visualize. ऐसे लगता है कि हम अपनी आंखों से उस सीन को देख रहे हैं. So these devils have landed on the plane और वो इतने ज्यादा हैं तो वो कंपेयर करके बताता है वैसे जैसे कि वो savage invaders थे जो नॉर्थ से साउथ में आए and then they took over the complete empire. And then he says forthwith. And after that what happens? अब Satan एक जगह पे खड़ा है. This is a plane. Satan खड़ा है अब and the whole army is also standing in front. Now they are not in the river of fire but they are on the burning land. Okay, and then what happens? He says forthwith. Forthwith means after that, from every squadron. And please remember this is an army and an army consists of a number of squadrons. जैसे कि बटालियन होती है, ग्रुप होते हैं आर्मी के, उस तरह से वो कह रहा है हर स्क्वाड्रन में से, from every squadron and each band. So from each group, or you can say from each battalion, the heads and leaders thither hast where stood their great commander. And what did they do? the heads and leaders, हर group और हर battalion का leader, thither haste, and he came forward quickly. Where did they come? To where the great commander stood. Who is the great commander? It is Satan. So they came quickly in front because they are the leaders, and they stood there in front of Satan. God-like shapes and forms, excelling human and princely dignities and powers that erst in heaven sat on thrones. He says they are those that have the power of gods and are much above the humans. They are definitely above the humans in as far as power, strength, immortality is concerned. They have everything which humans don't have, so they excel humans, and they are princely. Princely means at least in heaven they were like princes, because erst means earlier, pehle, because earlier in heavens they sat on thrones, though of their names in heavenly records now be no memorial, blotted out and raised by their rebellion from the book of fire. Raised means removed. Okay, and he says blotted out. Blotted out means rubbed, erased. वो कहता है कि पहले वो हेवन में प्रिंसेस की तरह बैठते थे, थ्रोन्स पे बैठते थे, बट नाउ इन द रिकॉर्ड्स ऑफ हेवन, इन द बुक ऑफ हेवन, इवन देयर नेम्स हैव बीन इरेज्ड, उनके नाम तक मिटा दिए गए हैं, एंड देयर मेमोरी हैज बीन रिमूव्ड, बिकॉज व्हाई, बिकॉज ऑफ देयर वॉर अगेंस्ट गॉड. ये जो रिबेलियन है, रिबेलियन होता क्या है? रिबेलियन होता है विद्रोह. उस विद्रोह की वजह से जो बुक्स ऑफ लाइफ है, ये जो बुक्स इन हेवन है, from these books their names have been raised and blotted out, and they cannot be found anymore. So do they not have any names now? इसका मतलब क्या है कि उनके पास कोई नाम नहीं है. तो पोएट अब हमें बताएगा कि अब उनके नए नाम हैं, वो नाम जिनसे कि वो अब अर्थ में जाने जाएंगे. दे विल बी नोन ऑन द अर्थ बाय डिफरेंट नेम्स, एंड दीज नेम्स we will be looking at now. Milton will be telling us these new names that these devils have got, because now the names that they originally had in heaven, those names have been blotted out. यहाँ पर आपको याद होगा कि सेटन का नाम हेवन में लूसिफर हुआ करता था, but even that name has been blotted out. And then he says, nor had they yet amongst the sons of Eve. And what does the poet mean by sons of Eve? He means humans. So he says, अभी तक humans में भी उन्हें कोई नाम नहीं मिले थे. They had not got any new names even by humans. Why? Because the human race has not yet been created. Okay, so they have not got any new names. He says, and they will not get any names until wandering on the earth through God's high sufferance for the trial of man. High sufferance of God means by the will of God. They will be able to reach the earth only because God wills them to do so. This I have mentioned earlier also, कि Satan और ये devils they might think that they are planning against God. उन्हें ऐसा लगता है कि वो भगवान के खिलाफ खुद ही प्लान बना रहे हैं. But the truth is God has planned everything beforehand. भगवान ने पहले ही प्लानिंग कर रखी है. And it is the trial of man. Trial means it is like the test of man. So God allows these devils to wander. Wander means to walk on earth, to roam around on the earth, and to interfere in the lives of men, only because God wants them to test. It is like a test of man by falsities and lies. Falsities also means the same thing, lies, jhoot. The greatest part of mankind they corrupted, and they were able to corrupt the most, the maximum, you can say. So most men were corrupted by them, and this is what God wanted to test. Will man be corrupted? And ultimately God found out that yes, maximum part of mankind was corrupted by them to forsake God, their creator, and they were so corrupted that they gave up the real God, and they started worshipping these pagan gods, or you can say false gods, or you can say devils in the form of God. ये devils की worship करने लगे और अपने असली भगवान को भूल गए. यही टेस्ट था जो भगवान ने लिया था, और मैक्सिमम मैनकाइंड इसी टेस्ट में फेल हो गई, because they were corrupted by these devils, and they forgot, they forsook, which means उन्होंने छोड़ दिया भगवान को, अपने असली भगवान को, who was their creator, and the invisible glory of him that made them. So they stopped praying to that invisible God. Why? Because they started praying these devils to transform oft to the image of a brute. Brute means a devil, adorned with gay religions full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Devils to adore for deities means they started worshipping the devils as gods. So now these devils who they will go to the earth, and then they will corrupt the whole of mankind. And after this, you will see that we come to another important part of the poem, where the poet gives us a roll call of the devils. जैसे कि क्लास में attendance होती है, roll call होती है, and every child's name is called out by the teacher. It is almost like that. It is almost as if Satan is calling out the names of the chief leaders, and then each of that leader is described कि वो अब कैसा है, and when he will be going to the earth, what name he will presume, what name he will get amongst the human race, and what kind of corruption will he actually spread, what kind of sins is that devil going to spread on earth amongst mankind. So those details are given, and I will just here stress the fact that there are you can actually make point wise description, as I will show you here. You don't have to really remember all the details, only the name and the main characteristic trait. नाम पता होना चाहिए, और उसकी जो एक कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ट्रेट है कि वो कौन सा डेविल था और वो कौन से सिन को, करप्शन को फैलाता था, बस इतना ही काफी है. Okay, so that roll call is going to be now in the coming slides. And if you see here, we will also find the second invocation of the muse, and because the first invocation of the muse was when the poem had actually begun. So Milton had invoked the muse that please god, goddess, come and be with me in this journey of writing the poem, and in the same way he is invoking the muse for the second time, that come muse and help me, because I am going to enlist I am going to take the names of the devils. So this is again important, and I am reading. He says, then were they known to men by various names. Who are they? They are the chief devils, or you can say the leaders. The chief devils or the leaders, and they were known by various names by men. क्योंकि उनके पुराने नाम तो खत्म हो चुके हैं, their names have been blotted out in heaven, they will get new names in the world of men. And various idols means statues, and various statues would be built for them in the heathen world. Heathen world means in the human world, in the world in which they will roam about, and they will get new names. So now we are going to a list of their names. So he says, and I am just writing this down, that this is the second invocation of the Muse. The second invocation of the Muse, uh, before the beginning of the roll call of the devils. So he says, say Muse, the names then known, who first, who last, roused from the slumber. He says, the first and the last of the leaders, I am going to name them on that fiery couch at their greatest emperor's call. And now they have awakened. They have awakened from slumber means from sleep, at the call of the greatest emperor, which means at the call of Satan. As next in worth came singly. They came singly means they approached Satan individually. एक एक करके वो सामने आए. Where he stood on the bare stand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. Promiscuous crowd here means the crowd of devils. It stood aloof means it stood far away. जो बाकी devils थे वो दूर खड़े थे, but these leaders came forward individually, one by one, you can say, and stood in front of their great emperor. The chief were those who from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, thus fixed their seats long after next the seat of God. And he says the main leaders were those who went to the earth and were able to corrupt man so badly that he built their temples right next to the temple of the real गॉड. तो भगवान के, असली भगवान के घर के साथ अपना घर, अपनी सीट एस्टैब्लिश करने में कामयाब रहे, ये वो थे. दीज वर द लीडर्स who made man, who corrupted man so badly that man forgot the difference between the real God and these devils. Their altar, by his altar, altar आप समझ सकते हैं, this is the holy seat. ये पूजा स्थान होता है जैसे किसी भी होली प्लेस का. तो जहां भगवान की पूजा की जाए, असली भगवान के साथ उसने अपनी इन डेविल्स की पूजा करने की जगह बनाई. देयर ऑल्टर बाय हिज ऑल्टर, हिज मीन्स द गॉड्स ऑल्टर. Gods adored among the nations round, and they became gods. They were adored means they were worshipped in so many nations and in so many places on the earth. And he says that, I'm reading, adored among the nations round. So they were worshipped in so many nations, and durst abide Jehovah thundering out of Sion. Now, who is Jehovah? Jehovah is the real God. So it is as if Jehovah thundered out of his temple. Why? Because he saw that these fake gods, these pretend gods, these devils were being worshipped like God himself. तो भगवान इतना गुस्सा होकर अपना टेम्पल छोड़कर चला गया सिर्फ इसलिए क्योंकि नकली गॉड्स को इंसान ने पूजना शुरू किया, जैसे कि एंजल्स के बीच में ही उसे बिठा दिया, often placed within his sanctuary, in itself their shrines. So man actually made their temples right inside the temples of God. And he calls them abominations. Abominations means they were insults. They were disgusted because they became the competitors of God himself. I'm just marking this out so that it becomes easy for you to read here. And he says, with cursed things his holy rites and solemn feasts profaned. Profaned means made unholy. तो जैसे अपवित्र करना, टू मेक समथिंग अनहोली, दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ द वर्ड प्रोफेन. सो भगवान की पवित्र जगह को भी अनहोली या अपवित्र बना दिया. ये जो थे ऐसे डेविल्स थे, एंड विद देयर डार्कनेस डस्ट अफ्रंट हिज लाइट. Of course, he is comparing them, the devils, to darkness and God to light. And he says they challenged. Affront means they challenged God's light with their darkness. This is the kind of effect that they had upon man. You just don't have to remember the lines, you just have to remember that this is what they had, the effect that they had. ये क्या असर उन्होंने किया इंसान के ऊपर कि इंसान डेविल को ही भगवान बना बैठा, भगवान के टेम्पल के साथ, और कहीं कहीं तो भगवान के टेम्पल के अंदर ही उनके टेम्पल बना लिए. This is the effect. And then if you can see here, I have highlighted the names of the devils with the darker color so that you may remember. And I am telling you again, the easiest way of doing this is to remember the name and the important characteristic. This is what I am going to tell you. You don't have to remember the names of the cities because the number of cities are also given. You don't have to remember the names of the rivers क्योंकि यहाँ पे ये बताया गया है कि कौन से रिवर्स वो जगह में बहते थे जहां पर ये डेविल्स अर्थ पे गए थे. यू डोंट हैव टू रिमेम्बर, यू जस्ट हैव टू रिमेम्बर द नेम ऑफ द डेविल. सो द फर्स्ट डेविल is Moloch, and Moloch is called the horrid king because he is the chief devil. So this you can remember about Moloch, that he is the chief devil, and a statue of Moloch was built that had a furnace in the chest in which children were thrown. So here Moloch asks for child sacrifice. This is the kind of God he became to humans who demanded child sacrifice. So this is the characteristic of Moloch. I hope you will remember, but you really don't have to go into all these details. You just have to remember that he asked for human sacrifice and basically the sacrifice of children, and he is the chief devil. He is called the horrid king. Moving on, uh, again he describes how even King Solomon became the worshipper of so maybe you can write down this one point, that King Solomon, who was actually a great ruler, he also became the worshipper of Moloch. Okay, so I think this, at least this one thing you can remember. And then we come to the second. If you can see here, I have marked out Chimos. This is another devil. Chimos can be like comes called the second in command, comes next to Moloch, and it was um, worshipped by nomadic people, and he demanded them to do lustful rites. I think these are the three things which you might need to remember about him. But you don't need to do the names of the places. I think that is not important. And then again, these things are given over here. Names of many places and rivers and things like that. But you don't need, not at all. You don't need to remember. You just have to remember this, that those who worshipped the devil gods, they heaped pain upon themselves because the real God punished them greatly. So I hope that is clear, that which cost them woe. Woe means pain. So the rites that they did for Moloch and for Chimos, it cost them pain because God punished them. So I think this is enough for Moloch and Chimos, and then you can just go ahead and leave these lines, because some devils are mentioned over here which will come later, so we are not going to do Balaam and Ashtoreth because they will come later also. So you can basically leave all of these details and move ahead, and then we have more details in these lines also. Just note down these lines. If you have your text in front of you, these are the lines which you can actually mark, because here is Milton is telling us that they assumed a number of shapes, they assumed a number of forms in order to fulfill their purpose. And what was that purpose? It was an evil purpose. I am reading this. He says, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed. Dilated means it could be a huge shape or a small shape. It could be bright or obscure. Of course, you know, it could be a beautiful shape or a faded shape. They could assume any shape. वो किसी भी रूप में इंसान के सामने आते थे. The only thing that ultimately they wanted to do was to fulfill, execute their evil purpose of corrupting mankind. And this is how they were going to take revenge against God. So all of this had just one purpose: to take revenge from God. And then moving ahead, we come to the third. This is the third devil, and the name is Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth, and now another name is given. Maybe you can remember this name also. Another name, Astarte. Excuse me. So the other name is Astarte, and the queen of heaven. So this is a female devil, the queen of heaven, and we are not going to go through many details here, but you can actually just note down that this is a female devil. The other name is given Astarte. This is also called the moon goddess by some pagan cultures, but we are not going to really go into the details. The only other thing you can remember, that she was worshipped by girls or females, you can say, but this is the goddess who is then also associated, directly associated with the next god, and this is god number 4. His name is Thamus. In Greek mythology, he is also called Adonis. In Greek mythology, Thamus is called Adonis, and he is the lover of Astarte. Astoreth. If you remember, Astoreth was the other name for Astarte, and in Greek mythology, just like Thamus is called Adonis, Astarte is called Venus. But they both are a pair. Astarte and Thamus, Adonis and Venus, they are a pair, and basically they ask for passionate rites, and they are definitely not the real gods. Rest of the details you don't need to do these, only the fact, all these points that I have written here, these points you can remember. It will be enough, and the names, definitely they are very very important. Moving on to the next slide, we have another name here, and that name is Dagon. This name, and this is our fifth devil. He is Dagon. About Dagon, the things that you can remember: he was the chief god of the Philistines. This is one thing. The statue of Dagon was half human, half fish. The lower part of the statue was half fish. This is important. And God proved that he was a devil by breaking his statue. These are the only details that you need to remember. Otherwise, there is no need to remember, because he is being called the sea monster, upward man, downward fish. This is the only thing you need to remember. You don't need to remember the names. So many names are given. These are the only names that you need to remember. Moving on to the next slide, we have the sixth devil here. The sixth devil, and his name is Rimmon. So this name is important. Now you must remember another thing about Rimmon, is that he was definitely a devil, a false god, and he had a follower whose name was Naaman. His name was Naaman, who was a great general, but had the disease of leprosy. If you know that leprosy is a disease, and he is called the leper. If you can see over here, in this line, a leper once he lost. So leprosy, so Naaman had leprosy, and he was cured by the true God. So when the true God cured him, Naaman stopped following Rimmon, and he became the believer of the true God. So this is how he lost a follower. A leper once he lost, and King Ahaz became his follower. So these details I think are enough for you to remember. And then we come to some animal gods. Nothing more about Rimmon, only these two things that you need to remember. One is this about King Ahaz, and one is this about Naaman the general. Now we come to some animal gods, and these names are given over here: Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So these are animal gods. So I am going to just write over here animal gods. What do you need to remember? Osiris is the ox, Isis is the cow, and Horus is the calf. So he is talking of animal worshipping, and he says, so in some cultures the beasts were treated like gods. Beasts were treated like gods. So that was what was punished. God did not like it, and God punished those people who considered the beasts as gods, and basically they forgot their own true God. And now we come to the last god, and the last false god, which means the last devil, and his name is Belial. So this is number 8, and his name is Belial. And Belial, he says, even though he came last, but he was really the most evil of them all, the most evil of the devils. This is what Milton says. And why did he call him the most evil? Because there were no temples dedicated to him. But where did Belial reside? He resided in the hearts of priests, which means he resided in the churches and in the hearts of kings, which means in the palaces or the courts. So you can understand, when the priest becomes corrupted, when the king becomes corrupted. So the king and the priest, he is talking of both religion and ruler becoming corrupted. So this is the worst of corruption. That is what he says, that Belial had no temple. उसका कोई temple तो नहीं था, लेकिन वो तो corrupt करता था priest और king दोनों को, और यही शायद इसीलिए he was the most evil. He says, no spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, and more gross to love vice for itself. यानी कि वो एक ऐसी स्पिरिट थी जो खुद सिर्फ इसलिए बुराई करती थी क्योंकि उसे बुराई से प्यार था. I hope this list of devils that we have done about 8 in number. You will note down the characteristics and you will use them, apply them in your answers, and you will only do the details as I have told you, and not get mixed up in the unnecessary details, because at least for the purpose of your examination that would not be necessary. And I will move on further in the next part of my video. Thank you very much.